Welcome to Business Files. We continue our weekly discussions on matters relating to business, finance, and our economy. Welcome also to our friends on the World Wide Web and to our loyal listeners at RFM Radio. On Business Files tonight, we take a look at Grenada's development strategy. Is it working or is it not working? And the possible solutions for a strategy that has relevance to Grenada's particular reality. Financial economist Michael Julien goes on record with his thoughts on the approach to our development needs, and my opinion will follow as usual. I am Michael Archibald, and this week's edition starts right now. Now, since the 70s, Grenada, like many Caribbean countries, has been struggling to overcome perhaps our most persistent challenge: how to put our country on a sustainable path to ever improving prosperity. How do we go about improving our standard of living without selling ourselves down the tube in the process? My guest tonight says many islands, including Grenada, have not produced logical, clear solutions to this dilemma. His thoughts are provocative and a divergence from what many people consider to be the gospel. But if nothing else, he forces you to think and at least revisit your own thoughts on our development priorities and our development strategies. His name is Michael Julien, a financial economist who has spent the last 25 years as an international consultant working on development issues in the Caribbean, the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. He's a Grenadian, and interestingly, he is now providing development advice to the government of St. Kitts.
What does it mean to be way above average? It means taking innovation to new heights with products and services that do more for you. It's making sure you can always call us up if you happen to be down. It's taking care of everything for you while you spend time enjoying life. It's the satisfaction of having more people working together to meet your needs. It's a higher perspective, new thinking with a vision to go above and beyond your expectations. Now that's way above your average insurer. Trans-Nemwell Insurance Grenada Limited, way above the average.
A short walk to the beach, a delightful all-suite 20-room boutique hotel. You will feel like an honored guest throughout your stay, being well looked after by your friendly staff. At Monmouth Hotel, each room is well equipped and charmingly decorated, and adjacent the central swimming pool with sunbeds and parasols. Garth's Restaurant serves Caribbean and international cuisine. Free wireless internet access is provided. Monmouth Hotel offers specials for accommodations and food and beverages on your birthdays and anniversaries to ensure quality time in a captivating surrounding. Contact 473-439-3408 or email monmouthhotel@spiceisle.com for details and reservations. Monmouth Hotel, ideal for a memorable stay in Grenada.
Optimize your success with sound advice and support from the professional business and management consultants at MBA Consultancy Incorporated. We are a focused management consultancy firm strongly committed to using the best management practices to assist businesses to develop the capabilities to compete. Our services include strategic planning, business planning, finance and banking, and general business administration. At MBA Consultancy Incorporated, we help our clients meet challenges and improve performance where it matters most. The bottom line, we offer training in management, relationship building, conflict management, and more. For business solutions you can trust, consult MBA Consultancy Incorporated, backed by decades of experience. To learn more about MBA Consultancy Incorporated, email mbaconsultancyinc@gmail.com or telephone 415-0855. Consult us.
This is Business Files, and I'm your host, Michael Archibald. This week, we are pleased to welcome into your living rooms and into your bars, and wherever you might be listening to Business Files, financial economist Michael Julien. Michael, we are pleased to have you, and welcome to Business Files.
Thank you for having me.
Michael, we were talking early on, and you were expressing some views with regard to the development strategy that Grenada and a lot of the other islands have used.
Sure.
And in your mind, it really was not working. Why are you saying that?
Well, it's not working as well as it should because we're putting more and more money into supporting foreign investment in the country, which doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. But development is about choices, and that means that you have to look at what you're getting in relative to what you're putting out, and then decide which options you should pursue. Now, in the early 70s and 80s, our focus on tourism and support services was quite logical. It made a lot of sense. But what happened is that over the last 10 to 20 years, we have begun to provide a tremendous amount of subsidies to the sector. So, for example, about 50% of the revenue that this government takes in is connected to tourism-related investment and tourism-related activities. We're taking about let's say we're taking 500 million EC dollars a year. About half of that, 250, is coming from the tourism sector. Now, we give up about $60 million a year to attract that 250 million in taxes. And the point that I'm making is the numbers are going up. We're giving up more and more every year.
The amount that we're giving up each year is increasing.
Yeah.
And you're not satisfied that what is coming in is increasing at the same rate.
Well, I don't think that the value from money proposition out of tourism is the best option for us. I think that there are other options, and one has to look at a number of other things in relation to foreign direct investment and tourism to determine what that is. We don't only have stay-over visitors and cruise ships. We have also a medical school, which, by the way, is contributing more to our economy than any other single sector.
Is the single biggest contributor at the moment.
Yeah, by far, twice as much as tourism. And then we have the marina business, and then we have sports and entertainment, and then we have, of course, we have expat residences that are contributing to people coming to live in Grenada.
But before we go there, I'm trying to satisfy myself that I understand where you're coming from. For the last 30 years, we have been following a sort of strategy that most of the islands have been following. And you're saying we have not got enough out of it, if I understand you correctly. Not that we haven't developed, but we have not developed at the rate that you think we should have developed, if I understand you correctly.
Well, if you look at the performance of the countries in the Caribbean, small and outside of the Caribbean, what one would call small countries, whether they are Singapore, Bermuda, Barbados, Grenada, you would see that we are lagging behind in terms of the national wealth, in terms of the income generation. The average income of a Grenadian on an annual basis is about $5,000 to $6,000 US dollars. In a lot of the other countries that have pursued strategies that are perhaps complementary to tourism, but have had a slightly different focus, their average incomes are 5 to 10 times what ours are. And so we have to revisit why is it that we are not able to use tourism and foreign direct investment in a way to take us out of this low income level that we're at.
And this low income level has persisted for the last
of course
20 or 30 years.
Yes.
But you see, but so we have developed, but nowhere close to where we could if we use a different strategy.
Agreed.
Is that?
Yes,
I'm understanding correctly.
That's what I'm saying.
Let's look at some of the strategies that have been followed. One of them is the tourism strategy. What is the difficulty that you have with this tourism strategy that has been followed?
Well, the thing with tourism is that our tourism sector has developed relatively slowly, and I use the word relatively a lot when compared with places like Jamaica.
Or St. Lucia.
Or St. Lucia.
Yes.
Or Barbados.
Yes.
And we've fallen so far behind that what we're getting out of it is not sufficient to raise the income levels of Grenadians.
Why do you think that is so? Why you think that is so?
Well, we don't have a product that has the depth that it needs to have in order to get the volume into the country so that we can live off of it properly. For example, in St. Kitts, there's one hotel, Marriott. It brings in 50,000 visitors a year. That's about half the stay-over visitor levels of Grenada. Grenada is 100, 125,000 a year. Now, because of that, we are putting a lot of money into roads, into port facilities, into upgrading our hospitals. It's costing us a lot, and we're not extracting from tourism the types of returns that allow us to continue to finance that investment without going into significant debt. And that's the primary reason why we're in so much trouble debt-wise.
We don't have a hotel, any one hotel of the size of the Marriott in St. Kitts.
Agreed?
We have a lot of smaller hotels.
Which is a mistake.
Yeah. Go ahead. Complete that thought. You say it's a mistake. Why?
It's a mistake because you can't get the airlift. You can't get the critical mass coming into the country.
Without a hotel of that size.
2 or 3 massive hotels.
Yes.
And if you look at the model in Jamaica, they have hotels that are 1,000 rooms, that are 500 rooms, that are 200 rooms, that are 100 rooms, right down to 50. And they have the full spectrum. They have high-end hotels, they have budget hotels, and they have mid-range hotels.
We seem to have pursued a small hotel and targeted the higher income tourists.
Yes.
And you're saying that we need to have a mix.
You must have a mix. You must have a complete product line. If you don't, then you're attracting a number of people for a very short period of time with an infrastructure, that is the hotels, that really need more capacity. But that capacity won't come because of the change in the logistics that has occurred in the airline industry. So if you look at the number of flights that we get into Grenada, for example, I think we get in maybe 3 to 5 international flights.
That's not a lot.
A week. We have an international airport that cost us close to $300 million US. It's not enough. And if you don't have very big hotels, you're not going to be able to maximize the use of the airport.
So you're saying instead of focusing on just these small, call them upper, hotels that are high-end hotels, we should have a mix. We should have a mix of the large hotels that attract more of the mass tourists, blend that with what we have.
Yes, correct. And that then allows the smaller hotels that are high-end to do a lot better. Because you then have more airlift in and out of the country, and you have more of a presence in a foreign market.
What about the argument I sometimes hear from some of these hoteliers that if we bring in the mass tourists, we will endanger the environment, all these people walking all over the place, that we don't have the infrastructure to take all this mass of people coming through?
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, you can have a hotel on Grandad's Beach that's 10 stories or 20 stories with a very small physical footprint. And by the way, the evidence is around the world that more densely occupied properties have a lower carbon footprint.
But it's not the property, it's the footprint of the number of people that come through. That's the argument I hear.
Yeah, well, that number is not based on real statistics. For example, the population of Bermuda, which is the country with the highest per capita income, the highest average income in the world is Bermuda, $80,000 US a year. Their density of population is about 1,600 people per square kilometer. But the place isn't necessarily overcrowded. In Grenada, our density of population is about 300 people per square kilometer. So we have lots of scope, lots of room, without having to endanger the environment.
All right. The government is talking about trying to attract one of these big hotels. But one of the things we hear them talking about is trying to get a loan from the Chinese to construct the hotel, and then the Four Seasons will come in as the management of the hotel. What do you think about that? That seems to go along the line of what you're talking about.
Not exactly, because Four Seasons is more of an exclusive resort, and they tend to focus on the high end of the market.
Okay, so
and they tend to go with the villa model plus hotels.
Yes, I think that is part of what they're talking about.
Yes,
yeah.
but I think the government is ill-advised to borrow money from, or to guarantee a loan that is coming from the Chinese government to support that particular project.
Why?
Well, because if you do just a basic scan on the net, you'll see that the Four Seasons project in Nevis is having problems. The one in Barbados needs $60 million in equity to carry it forward, and they had quite a number of teething problems over the last 2 years. There is one in California that's having difficulty as well. But that's not the main reason why I think that they should not take this loan out, or to provide a guarantee to China to lend the money or to put equity into the project. The main reason is, if you are going to do something with a sum of money in the vicinity of 100 million, you need to look at all of your choices and what is going to give you the biggest bang for buck. And so far, we're not seeing that coming from foreign investment or just straight out project investment in the hotel or the tourism sector. And there are other options for us to look at that if we were to explore them, we might reach a different conclusion about how to use that money.
In our other conversations, the whole term of foreign investment has come up more than once.
Yes.
Are you saying that foreign investment is not, we should not seek to attract foreign investment?
No, you should attract as much foreign investment as you can. But you must define foreign investment very carefully and not just focus on one type of foreign investment.
I.e. foreign investment into
tourism specifically. Yeah. Now, the thing is, there was an assessment done of where Grenada stood relative to 4 other countries with regard to foreign investment. In terms of the way that you benchmark the country, you look at its relative status. We have 3 great things going for us in that assessment. One is that our infrastructure is relatively good. It's close to the top of the line in terms of the group of countries that were reviewed.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
The second thing is that we have the best record in terms of crime in the Caribbean, in the group of 5 countries. Yeah? And that's very important, because when people come to your country for holiday or to live, that's a critical factor, and it's a great asset for us to retain. And the third thing is that the quality of life in Grenada is very good. So we score very high marks on those 3 variables. We score very low marks on variables that are critical to people who want to come into your country to actually do business. And the one that stands out more than anything else is our labor environment. Yeah, and our labor profile. So what we have is, we have a major shortage of professional people. We have very low technical skills. We have labor laws that are one-sided and not in favor of everyone. They're certainly in favor of the employee more than they are the employer. So that needs to be reviewed. And the other thing is that we have a very low level of productivity in terms of what the average worker is going to deliver on a project, on a foreign investment project. Yeah? And it's interesting that foreign investors are less interested in how many concessions they get. They're more interested, because after all it's said and done, when you start a business, it's about the way you make it work that determines how much money you make. And so we have a major challenge to resolve the problems that come with labor deficiencies in our market. Yeah?
Following along that line of thinking, if you had that 100 million, you're saying that you don't think it should be put into this hotel. Where would you put it?
Well, the first thing that I would do is I try to figure out...
You're looking at options.
Yeah. The first thing I try to do is figure out where I'd get the most benefit out of the investment. But before we do that, let's look at something that Singapore does, for example. And they did quite recently, right after the global financial crisis. And then the Prime Minister, when he was interviewed, they said to him, look, what was your strategy to keep your head above water? And he said, there are just 2 things that we did. One is we protect the things that we already have that are doing well. And the second thing that we do is we make sure that we keep reinforcing and strengthening our human capital.
All right.
So we make sure that we're not going deficient on human capital.
So it's 2 things. We protect what we have.
Yes.
And we make we make sure we're not deficient on human capital.
Yes.
We're going to take a break, but
Sure.
I want to bring us back at the end of that, right back into those three things, translate that to Grenada.
Sure.
What are the three things we should be protecting? Following that same line of thought. Business Files, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Business Files. We have been speaking to financial economist Michael Julien, and we were talking about the approach used by Singapore in the last 2 years, even in the face of the financial downturn. And they were saying that the first thing they did was protect the areas that were doing well.
Yeah.
And the second had to do with the human capital.
Sure.
If you translate that to Grenada, would you say the same thing? We should first protect the areas that are doing well.
Yeah. Well, it's just common sense. If
Yeah.
you have industries or sectors that are doing very well, your priority is not to let them slip.
In our case, what are those? What would you name
the
as
number
those three
one?
sectors?
The number one industry or sector is the offshore medical education that is being offered up here.
Yes.
And the reason why I say that is because the offshore sector, the education sector, is offering up a quality of economic development that is not being offered up by tourism. When people come here to go to school, what happens is they go to rent apartments that are owned by Grenadians. And that means that Grenadians are benefiting from it, not just in the form of rental income, but in terms of wealth creation, because the properties are increasing in value. Whereas when a tourist comes here, most of the money, I would say about 90% of it, leaves the island because it's going back out in terms of goods and services that are provided to support the sector. So that's the number one industry.
How would you protect that?
Well, you need to go to the school and you need to say, look, what are the kinks in the armor? What are the things that are happening to you that you need help with? So if I had $100 million US, I would want to take some of that money and to help the school. Is it that the students, some of the students aren't able to get student loans overseas, in the US or in the Caribbean? If that's the case, then it's in our interest to provide loans for students to come to St. George's University.
So to look for where they're having difficulties, where the school is having difficulties.
Because we just don't want that school to ever leave here.
The Minister of
one of
Finance,
the worst things that could happen to us.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. The Minister of Finance in his budget speech singled out, he named 5 sectors that they wanted to concentrate on. And the first one was, in fact, what I want to quote him properly, I think he called it medical something. But it had to do with the medical school. And increasing and improving our relationship with the medical school. And hoping that that will result in increases, 1, in a nursing school, and 2, in a teaching hospital. Is that along the lines that you're talking about?
Yes. A teaching hospital is important for many other reasons. And one of them is that if you want to attract people here, to live here, to retire here, they must have good hospital facilities. And in addition to that, offshore medical tourism is beginning to filter through the region. It's been promoted very successfully in Costa Rica. There's some signs of it emerging in Barbados. There are a few people doing things in Anguilla and Antigua. And it's a complementary service to what is already being provided in terms of medical education.
It is unfortunate, though, because I understand that despite what the Minister of Finance has said, the medical school has applied for a nursing school, license to open a nursing school, and to incorporate whatever our nursing school is into their school. And they have been waiting over a year for an answer. I think that's most unfortunate.
Well, that's one of the things that we scored lowly on in terms of foreign direct investment status, that we are processing
it's so difficult.
Of business requests and so on to set up businesses is very, very
well, we scored fairly low on that index. There is a desk in the Ministry of Finance, and my understanding is that is one of their priorities, which is supposed to improve all these things. I guess we have to wait and see when the next index when the next one is done, which is supposed to be this year, and see if we have in fact improved.
Of course.
But I was disappointed that it's taken over a year and the medical school is still waiting for a response. And given the importance of the medical school, as you pointed out, to our economy, one would have thought that they would have jumped in that and sat down with the people very quickly.
Sure.
So that is one.
There are others. The other industry...
mention a few more.
Yeah, the other industry is the marina business, of course. If you look at the sort of the topography of Grenada, the map of Grenada, you will see that we have probably one of the best locations in the Caribbean for doing that.
That's the marinas.
The marina business. And the spend rate from a typical yacht, I'm talking about a budget yacht, is about $2,000 a month. That business is as big as $200 million in the British Virgin Islands. And we can develop that sector if we, again, listen, go to the people in the industry, go to Justin and go to Jason and so on, and say, look, what do you need to do? It's growing, and we want to make sure that it doesn't slip. So that's the strategy to support and work with sectors that are growing. And those sectors are growing at a faster rate than tourism.
And with less help.
And with less help.
From the government.
But what happens in every country, what happens is that all new industries started as a sort of a one-man operation. The 7 Mile Beach in Negril in Jamaica, the first hotel was put down by a gentleman called Abe Issa. And then, of course, we now see the family with extensive holdings in things like breezes and hedonism and swept away and so on. So things start off as sort of a 1 or 2 man show, and then it gets to the point where you need to provide more support to them so that they can function more effectively. There are laws that need to be changed, there are rules, regulations, there are things you need to be supporting.
So put more focus on that aspect of your tourism.
Yes.
But I want to go back to the idea, though, what you spoke about in Jamaica, who had both the large and the small hotels. How do we attract one of these large hotels that you were talking about that catered for more of the mass tourism so that we can improve that blend? Because Grenada seem to have a lot of difficulty in attracting foreign investment. We, over the years, have attracted a lot of questionable characters who talked about foreign investment.
No doubt.
Right. We don't seem to have been very successful in getting foreign investment. So 2 questions. 1, why you think that is so? And 2, how would you go about attracting one of these larger hotels so that improve that mix that you were talking about? So it's 2 questions I'll answer.
Well, the thing that distinguishes countries, certainly the ones in the Caribbean, from the successful ones, again, from the ones that are having a hard time, is that they're far more receptive to the idea of, they're not as suspicious of foreign investors as we are. We have an extremely high level of xenophobia. We don't like them, we don't want them, and you can't have your cake and eat it. If you want development, you have to have a more accommodating approach to foreign investment, which does not mean that you let the carpetbaggers in and you give away everything just because they say they can deliver on something.
I agree.
So that's the first thing, but so you have to do that. And the other thing is that I think you have to be more proactive and go out there and talk to all the big hotel chains.
The government will argue that they are being proactive and that really the problem is the downturn in the world economy, and that is why they have not been able to attract any foreign investment.
Of course, and if one looks at the strategy over time, you have to accept that the probability of getting in a big hotel into Grenada now is, and I'm talking about volume, 600 rooms, etc., is probably not as good as it was when we saw foreign investment on upswing in sort of 2006 and 2005 and so on. So, but you should still pursue it, because over the next 10 years, if things swing the other way and start to become more positive, then
are you satisfied that we are being proactive enough on both on trying to attract it and also dealing with the same xenophobia or this fear of the foreign investor that is so prevalent in this country?
Sure. Well, I don't know if we're being proactive enough, because I haven't spoken to the people who are in charge of that. Yeah. But the xenophobia needs to be addressed through communication and awareness programs, discussions that Grenadians have with government and what that all means for them. What we have seen happening in Grenada, and that's why the xenophobia exists, is that people come here, they're given things that Grenadians could not dream of getting from their own governments. People don't pay taxes, they don't pay a share of the profits to the government. When they do cash out, And we are the ones sitting here paying all the bills. We're paying for the infrastructure, we're paying for the maintenance of public services, and there's genuine resentment about that. And that needs to be addressed, possibly by showing people that for every dollar that you give up to foreign investors, you get back, say, $5 in taxes.
Yes.
And that needs to be carefully explained.
I agree. There needs to be a specific program to deal with that. Because what we tend to hear on the radio, in the press, is the xenophobia, the people who are against foreign investment. And you don't hear enough, in my mind, and it's something that I have said many times, enough on the government side, explaining why you want to get foreign investment. So what you hear and what the foreign investor hears, and I argue that the foreign investors listen, because the people who live in here listen, and they talk, and they write, and they go on the net, it tends to be one-sided. Right? That does not mean, as you rightly pointed out, we need to give things away. But we need to attract some foreign investment. But what I like the direction which you're going is where that money, or where we should be trying to attract it.
Yes.
You mentioned two areas so far, the marinas and that whole area there. And you mentioned the medical school, which is obvious. One more.
Yeah, the third area is what I call this, for those of us who understand a little bit of history outside of the Caribbean, I call this the holy grail of development. There is one single thing that rich countries and big ones and small countries have in common, that both groups pursue relentlessly. And that particular thing underscores their success. Yeah? And that is that they are obsessive about attracting brain power to their countries. And this is the essence of true development. You can have all the plans in the world if you don't have the people with it.
Is that what you were getting at when you said Singapore had the second area, which was human
capital? Human capital. Yes.
So that's what you were
getting at.
Yes,
that's precisely the area I'm talking about. Just to give you a comparison, yeah? For every one person that would come to live in Grenada or St. Kitts or another island, you need 20 to 30 tourists to come to the island to generate the same spending in a year.
Say that again.
For every one person that lives here permanently, you need 20 to 30 tourists to come to live in your country to spend the same amount of money on an annual basis. If you add up how much the 20 tourists spent and how much this one person spent.
So therefore?
Yeah. So therefore, bang for buck, it's better to have people come and live in your country than to try to subsidize tourism sector development.
So who would you want to attract to live in the country?
Well, if I were doing it, I would want to attract skilled people who are above a certain level of expertise and experience. So for example, Australia has a program, and they had it last year, where they put out ads to attract 190,000 skilled people to come and live in Australia. Yeah? But it's interesting that people think that the United States, that the basis of its economic power has to do with technology, and it has to do with money, it has to do with size. But the secret of America's success is the inward migration of people that occurred between, say, 1800 and 1950. Yeah? Now, 60 million people left Europe and went over to the United States to live. And they brought with them ideas, brain power, productivity, workforce, the whole set. Now, look at Grenada, for example. In the last 20 years, Grenada's population has increased from 96,000 to 106. It's 105, let's say 106. 10,000 people. How many people is that a year? Yeah? It's 500 people a year. Let's make the assumption that instead of them being born and having to grow up for 20 years, we do like this. And they're available, they have money, they're working, and they're going to spend it in the economy. That means that over 2,000 businesses have to share 500 people a year in terms of additional revenue and sales that are being generated. And that's not enough to fuel economic growth.
I think we need to pause and talk about this. This is very interesting. You're going to hear the argument. We go back to the same xenophobia again.
Yes.
That people are going to be worried about any attempts to attract more people into Grenada. One, they're going to talk about the size of Grenada. And then they're going to talk, which we hear very much again from some areas in the government, well, these people are going to come and buy land, and it's going to push up the price of land, and therefore the average Grenadian is not going to get land. You're going to get all those arguments. How do you respond to those arguments?
Well, let's deal with the most important aspect of xenophobia is that people are, or a fear of foreigners, if it's a simpler way of putting it, is that Grenadians don't want people to come here because they are afraid of losing their jobs and being outcompeted,
yes.
if you find another term,
yes.
yeah, another word. The thing is that we have between 30 to 50% unemployment now. Yeah. Now let's take the example of one person coming to Grenada to live. What do they do when they arrive at the airport? They use a taxi. What do they do before they get settled? They go stay in a hotel. They buy food. They go to the supermarket. When they get a place, they're renting it, they're paying rent to a Grenadian. When they have to call people overseas, their family and friends, they get a Digicel or a line telephone. Look at what is happening. For every single person that comes into the country, expenditure starts. And when expenditure starts, people start to make money.
But that is before they actually stay to reside and look for a job.
Well, the thing is that what I'm saying is that going back to the deficiency that we have in terms of our ranking
yes.
of foreign direct investment, we have three big problems. We have a shortage of professional people. We have technical skills that are not up to the requirements of the foreign investors, and we have low productivity. And so by bringing people in, just for the domestic market, and I'm not talking about just the domestic market alone, you are going to find that you are going to have access to those skills. You're going to have access to people who are more determined, just like we were more determined when we went to live in the United States and Canada and in England. The West Indians would leave the West Indies and go and produce more than the Americans would or the British people would, and we would succeed. And that's the model, the secret of the model that has been used before. Now, you have to compete. You can't be protected all your life. You can't expect to have a job that is just yours, secure forever.
But there's a real fear, and I agree with that, because when we go overseas, we compete very successfully.
Extremely successfully.
But there is a real fear here that will have to be tackled head on.
Well, it has to be tackled by a process of education, but it also has to be tackled in a slightly different way, in that the bigger opportunity for us is not necessarily to just bring people to Grenada to work here, but to bring people like me, to bring companies here, to set up shop here, and to operate, to have some of their operations out of Grenada.
So it's not just attracting the skills, but you want to attract people who are going to set up business.
Yeah, I mean,
first and foremost, both.
Yeah, I mean, what Ireland did was they dropped their corporate tax rate to 15%. They're in trouble now, but all countries in the world are in trouble.
They were a miracle.
Yeah,
yes.
and that was we know what happened there.
Yes.
People just arrived in droves and set up business there and operated sometimes marketing arms of companies.
So you would drop our corporate tax?
Yes.
Across the board?
Yes.
In the hope that that will attract, well, you'll have to do some proactive things too.
Yes.
The basis is to attract people to come and invest and live in the country.
Correct. Not necessarily depending on Grenada for income, but they are living here and operating out of Grenada. So we have an excellent opportunity, for example, with Trinidad, where if we had lower tax rates than Trinidad, because our crime rates are lower, because this is a great quality, Trinidadians love Grenada, it's a great quality of life for them, they would seriously consider with all their oil well say, look, why don't I operate out of Grenada? You know, I could go down to Trinidad once a week, twice a week.
What about the other argument that you're going to get, Michael, and you will hear this argument everywhere in Grenada? They're going to buy up all the land, and the Grenadians won't be able to get land because the price of land is going up.
That's a legitimate argument, and the way that it has to be dealt with is that the government has to come up with the land use policy and land reform policy,
which every government has promised
and perhaps hasn't delivered yet. But I know that the Minister of Finance, I had a brief discussion with him a couple of months ago, and he was quite keen to get going on it. And I think that's something that we would have to focus on. I mean, just bringing the people here doesn't mean that it's going to be a magical solution.
No.
There are a number of things that you're going to have to adjust and put in place. In some countries, for example, in the Netherlands, most of the land that is used for urban development or for commercial development purposes is leased land. It's not sold. In Guernsey, which is off the UK, if you want to go to live there, you have to agree to spend the majority of your time there in order to be given the title to your property.
What about...
So there are many options.
We have to go for a break, but one question before we go to the break. What about people who come to retire? People, well, not Grenadians so much, but people, say from the United States or Trinidad or anywhere of a certain level of income who want to come and live here because of the standard of the quality of life here. They come, they buy a piece of land, they build a home. Of course, their income comes in, their pension or whatever comes in. They shop at the shops. They will hire gardeners. What do you think about those?
I think it's excellent for them to come and do that.
So you would encourage that?
Of course. The more the merrier.
Okay. Michael, we're coming right back to you. Business Files. We'll take a short break. Welcome back to Business Files. We have been speaking to financial economist Michael Julien, and we have been talking a lot about the direction in which he thinks our development strategy should take. We were talking about the amount of money the government was thinking about borrowing. But the government is borrowing some money to put into agricultural feeder roads. And every government has done that over the last 30 years. And as I said on the program last week, an economist friend of mine said he disagrees with that entirely. And his reason is that he has not seen the increase in agricultural production that justifies that kind of expenditure on the feeder roads. Yet we continue to put the money into feeder roads. And secondly, he says all that happens is that when you put the money into those feeder roads, you make them into concrete roads, the farmer then, because the land is now accessible, by motor vehicle, just sells it off in house lots. So agriculture doesn't benefit. What do you react to that statement?
If we're giving up 60 million a year for tourism, for 10 years that's 750 million EC dollars. We're giving up to support that industry. So why can't we put in feeder roads for agriculture? When agriculture was king in Grenada, the well-being, the standard of life, the quality of life of farming communities was far higher than it is today. And if I were in the government, I would ban the importation of many agricultural products that come to Grenada.
But given all the agreements we have signed, we can't just ban things, can we?
Regardless of all the agreements that we have signed, we're a poor country and we need to take care of our farmers, and we need to encourage them to grow product for Grenadian consumption.
So you would continue to that feeder road program?
Yes, of course.
What about the fact that in almost every place, what has happened is that the land has just been cut off and sold up for residential purposes?
That's normal. It's obviously been cut off and sold, a lot of it, because there's demand. So people are looking for places to buy to live.
But you're putting it into feeder roads. You're borrowing to put it into feeder roads.
Yes.
And what is the return? The loan, the source of the income to repay is not from agriculture; it's from other sources.
Okay. Well, it's a contribution to the repayment of the roads. You could have an adjustment. From an economist's point of view, you could say if you carve up the land and sell it, then there would be taxes that would be applied to that land that would then help to pay back for the feeder road.
But
and you can also zone and dedicate
you would have to zone,
for farming.
But it's almost as if the government is in fact bankrolling real estate developers.
Well, they've been bankrolling a lot of investment in Grenada for
but
quite
the fact
some
that
time. Why not farmers?
But the fact that you're doing something wrong doesn't mean you must continue doing something wrong somewhere else.
Okay, I take your point.
But I thought it was an interesting comment though, because this new government is doing exactly what previous governments did, which is borrow a whole lot of money, put it into feeder roads.
Yes.
And the supposed purpose is to increase agricultural production, but we're not seeing that. So in any other thing in which you're putting money in and you're not seeing the results, you stop.
Yes.
And I think that is his argument.
Well, if that was the case, we should have stopped investing in tourism a long time ago. So, but the thing that I would like to sort of get into is this issue of what are we going to do about our population.
Before you do that, because that's going to take up the rest of this sector. One question, what would you do, how would you approach the development of agriculture in this country?
I don't have an immediate solution. I'd have to do an analysis to see what the recommendations should be. But the reality is you need to send signals to farmers that you are serious about supporting them. The feeder roads, I think, is such just one aspect of it. And you need to provide the support so that they can produce the products that we need to consume in the country.
But then you also have to make sure that they in fact do, or you get that result. But to go back to the key steps of what you think we should be putting into practice, if you had the decisions to make, how would you go about it?
I mean, if I had the 100 million,
or you had to advise the government as the steps they should take to point our development in the right direction.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the number one priority for Grenada is to increase its population base. To me, if we don't do that, we're not going to get the consumption levels up. And
so increase demand.
And increase demand for just basic products in the supermarket, in the hairdressing salons, and in the fish market, etc. So the thing is to look at how we should go about doing that and to put in place a program, not to wait on a growth rate that is minuscule. In fact, Grenada's growth rate, population growth, is half of 1% a year. Yeah? So on average. So we need to ramp up that growth rate, which means that we need to put in place policies that are conducive to having people come here, another 5,000 to 10,000 people at a minimum.
But a particular type of people.
Particular types of people, skilled people.
And people who can want to go into business.
Of course, and people who want to continue to do their businesses overseas, so that's a form of export earnings for us. And the world has changed since the last 20 or 30 years. When I get up in the morning, I speak to my friends in Iraq, I speak to people in Indonesia, I speak to people in Sudan. You know, you can do a lot of business from a home base. You don't have to worry that you are in a particular location and you can't do a lot of work. So there are lots of people, there are millions of people around the world who do that. And I want to point out one particular point that we tend to miss. We are now, the world is now at about 7 billion people. And we're going to get to 9 billion by the year, say 2050. We have two choices, because the extra 2 billion people, there'll be maybe 10% who are extremely wealthy, which would be 200 million people running around the world looking for exclusive places like Grenada. And we have two choices. We let them come here and operate as expats, or we encourage them to come here and become Grenadians, one of the two. When they come here and operate as expats, we don't even get 10% out of them of what we could get out of them. If they come here and we go through a program of what I call Grenadianization.
What does that mean?
Grenadianization means that we allow these people to become Grenadian citizens within a very short period of time, not 10 or 15 years, but perhaps 3 or 5 years, that there are certain processes that we use to bring them into the decision-making process in our societies. And in so doing, we will get more out of them than if we just treat them as sort of just a source, a milk cow that we get some extra money from.
What it is that you say we'll get out of them if we do that?
If we do that, they'll spend more time here. Yeah. They'll begin to feel like they're Grenadians. They'll want to contribute to the development of Grenada. They'll spend more of their money here. And they'll talk to their friends and say, you know, this is a great place to be. Why don't you come here and take a look? And so they act as sort of foreign investment marketers for us in other markets.
So you see increasing employment and bringing new ideas to the country?
Yes. And so we cannot...
Increasing demand?
Increasing demand. We cannot determine what type of development will occur in advance, because development is all about people with ideas. And so that's the major thing that the government could do. But it takes a change in the way they think, in the way people look at how you view foreigners coming to your country.
So you have to mount quite a significant campaign, a public relations campaign, for want of another word, to change the thinking of Grenadians.
Yes, but the evidence is irrefutable. When we have allowed Lebanese, Syrians, Portuguese, Indians, people to come here to live, they have become Grenadians. Aren't they Grenadians? Aren't the Hadis Grenadians? I think they are. And you look at the Ramdanis, aren't they Grenadians? I think so. So there is a process, there is a osmosis process, a process of assimilation that occurs over a relatively long period of time. We need to shorten that because we need these people.
You will also have to change a number of laws, property laws, etc.
Of course, yes.
And I like the one about the corporate tax, moving that to 5%.
15% is reasonable, yeah.
I think the Minister of Finance will flinch when he hears that.
Well, he'll probably flinch when he hears it, and when it begins to reap the benefits for the country, he'll probably throw a big party as well.
If you had to stop something now that we're doing, as far as our development strategy is going, which one would you stop?
Well, I wouldn't stop anything. I would simply
redirect.
I would redirect our resources to the things that are working well, and there are things that are working.
And you
quite
mentioned
well,
medical school and that
yes.
whole area
yes.
there. You mentioned also marinas.
Yes.
Yes.
Interestingly, I mean, George Brezan wrote a book a few years ago which showed what the primary products were of Grenada, I think 200 years ago. None of them exist today. What we have to appreciate and understand is what is a winner today may not be a winner tomorrow. And we have to have the flexibility to identify the new things that are coming up that perhaps we didn't even think of, and we have to support them. And that's another secret.
You mentioned two others.
Yes.
Offshore education, which has to do with the medical school, the yachting and marina services, which other people are talking about, but somehow the decisions have not been made, but other people are talking about. I had the people from the airport, and they were saying one of the things they've been seeing also increase is wealthy people who fly in, their yachts coming at the new, they're flying, and we're seeing them, they spend a little while at the yachts. And of course, they spend a lot of money. We've seen that too. But they make the same point that you also made, is that the regular yachts are the ones who are spending a whole lot of money.
Oh, yes.
You also mentioned entertainment and sporting events as a sector that you think should be encouraged.
Yes. Well, we have a huge stadium. We're beginning to see considerable success, highly impressive success with athletes. There are opportunities to do things like set up clinics, set up coaching centers. Pat Cash, who was in the Wimbledon final a few years ago, is setting up one in St. Vincent for tennis. So there are quite a lot of opportunities in that area. And we have Karani James, who is world class. I hope he wins the Olympic gold medal.
Just did a record again.
Yeah, and you want to build on those things.
And the last one you mentioned, you talk expatriate homes and services.
Yeah, I think the thing that I find is a bit of a anomaly in that area is that we're trying to attract extremely wealthy people. We have homes and condos that we're offering $1 million US, $2 million, $3 million US, and that's fine. But we have nothing at the middle tier of the market. There's nobody developing projects here at 500,000 EC dollars for people to come and live here. And by the way, just like a budget yacht or ordinary yacht is going to keep spending money here, so too will people who come and live in cheaper or less expensive
You're talking
homes.
about retirees?
Yes, retirees. There are models, for example, that we don't have down here. In Jamaica, you have properties are stratified so that you can own an apartment within a complex. And in Grenada, that, I believe, is probably governed by the Condo Act.
I believe they have recently changed the Condo Act.
Okay, but there needs to be more incentives to build sort of low carbon footprint, density type properties where Grenadians and foreigners who want to come down for 2 or 3 months, they come and spend time, and that's their home. That's actually their home. We don't even have that end of the market established yet. And that's what I mean by concentrating on deepening the expat market product, because right now it's all about, if you have 500,000 US or $1 million US or 2 million, here is the property. But there are tens of thousands of people who can afford to buy properties that are a lot cheaper.
And we need to attract them.
And we need to attract them.
We are unfortunately out of time. So I'm going to ask you to wrap up by taking the last minute and say something to our listeners and viewers as to, with regard to your thoughts on our development. You said a lot already.
Yes.
But what would you like to leave the thinking of Grenadians who are listening?
Well, I'd like to, if there's one thing that I'd like to leave them with, is that I'd like them to start thinking about alternative ways of improving our prosperity in the country. Rather than continuing on a singular track, let's look at some new ways of doing things.
And the singular track is tourism as we have been
As
doing.
we have it, as we
So
know.
you're not against tourism,
Yes.
but you want to redirect it.
Yes, and to support the things that are almost growing on their own without our initial input. And that's what I'd like to if they would just think about that, if they would look at the models that have been used by other countries in St. Martin, in Bermuda, in Singapore, and to understand how those models work, and so that it reduces their fear factor with how they feel about making changes in development strategy, then that would be the one thing I would say, yes, we've been successful in this session. Yeah.
Michael, we have to call you back. And I hope you'll be willing to join us together with another economist so we can explore these things a little more.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, don't leave it. Business Files, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Business Files. This is the segment in which I get to give my opinion. But before I do that, I would like to remind listeners of our retirement seminar next week, Friday, or the 28th of May, the deadline for which is tomorrow. And we look forward to more and more people attending seminars such as this, as it provides all sorts of interesting information. But tonight, we were listening to Michael Julien. And as I said, whether you agree with him or not, he certainly provokes a lot of thought and makes you rethink or at least reassess, look again at your own thoughts about about our development and the strategy that we should use. I want to quote from the great law of the Iroquois Confederacy, and they said, "In our every deliberation, we must consider the impact of our decisions on the next 7 generations." I'm saying that because in all the decisions we make now about development of our country, we must consider not just ourselves, but the next generations to come. And it was interesting, some of the ideas that Michael had. While you might disagree with some, there certainly were some very interesting ideas. For instance, the areas that he selected: offshore education, yachting and marina services, entertainment and sporting events, and expatriate homes and services. I thought the most interesting one was his recommendation that we attract and seek to attract another 10,000 people to live in Grenada, and I'm sure that will cause quite a bit of thinking and consternation among those listening. And his reasons were quite clear, and I'm going to ask him to come back to explain those reasons a little more. But obviously he was thinking about inviting people who can start businesses, create businesses, or who will want to live here and have part of their business, which remains overseas, bring part of their business, a department, etc. here, and all the benefits that can accrue to Grenada from that. Of course, as he pointed out, there would have to be a very serious public relations campaign to see if we can get rid of some of the xenophobia that we have with regard to foreign investors. But that one I'm going to think about some more, because I think it is very interesting, and it's opened a new area that I frankly have not thought too much about. Having said that, this is the end of our program for this week, and we will see you again next week.